Nobody was laughing when Mara Keene drove out of the auction yard behind an old red tractor. But they were laughing when she raised her bidder card. She was 13, standing between two rows of muddy pickups in an oversized denim chore coat, holding a grease-stained notebook against her chest like it was armor. In front of her sat a tractor every grown man in that yard had already dismissed. A 1978 International Harvester 986. Faded red paint, bent fender, loader arms hanging low. Front tires half flat, and a hydraulic system that screamed every time the operator touched the lever. The regulars had one verdict: pump is gone. And when a tractor's hydraulic pump is gone, most buyers do not see a machine. They see a bill. But Mara had come there for that tractor. Most people scroll past stories like this before they ever hit subscribe. But if you have ever been underestimated by people who mistook your silence for weakness, stay with this one. Because what that girl heard in the engine was not failure. It was a clue. It was the first Saturday of November in 2019, and the auction yard outside Briar Creek, Oklahoma, looked like every farm auction looks when the weather turns mean. Low clouds, gravel turned soft from last night's rain, diesel smoke hanging under a gray sky. Men in insulated coveralls leaned against gooseneck trailers, talking over the clatter of chains and the cough of old engines being started one last time. The sale belonged to a farmer named Amos Weller, 76 years old, 43 seasons on the same bottomland place. His knees were bad, his sons had moved to Tulsa, and that morning he was selling the machinery he had spent a lifetime patching back together. A disc harrow, 2 wagons, a hay rake, 3 trucks that may or may not have moved under their own power. And at the far edge of the yard, lot number 29. The Old International. The catalog description was short. Runs, hydraulics weak, sells as is. Everyone knew what that meant. The tractor had power, but the loader arms would not hold. When the operator lifted them, they shook, whined, and sank back down as if the machine were too tired to fight gravity anymore. A man in a black feed store cap said the pump sounded like a coffee grinder. Another said the whole hydraulic system was full of metal. Somebody else slapped the hood and said, "Scrap iron with a seat." Mara heard all of it. She did not answer. She had arrived in the passenger seat of her mother's old Tahoe just after 8. Her mother, Dana, parked near the gate, handed Mara a folded bidder card and said the same thing she had said at home. "I will stand with you. I will not bid for you." That was the deal. Mara had $3,800 in a savings envelope and permission to spend it once. Clothes. Not on a phone, not on a dirt bike. One machine. If she was wrong, the money was gone. So she walked across the gravel alone with number 62 clipped to her coat. She was small for 13, brown braid tucked into the collar, mud on the cuffs of her jeans, boots too large because they had belonged to her older cousin first. Men turned as she passed. One of them smiled and said, "Auction's this way, honey. Petting zoo is somewhere else." A few laughed, not hard, just enough. Mara kept walking. She stopped at lot 29 and opened her notebook. The tractor was idling rough but not dying. She moved slowly around it, the way somebody moves around an animal they do not want to spook. She watched the loader arms drop. She watched the steering wheel shudder. She crouched near the left rear tire and looked under the platform where the hydraulic lines ran into shadow. Then she did something that made one of the men near the wagons stop talking. She closed her eyes. Not for long. 3 seconds, maybe 4. She listened. The hydraulic whine was high and ragged, not a steady grind, not the deep growl of a pump chewing itself apart. It rose, broke, sucked air, and came back with a wet flutter at the end. She wrote one line in her notebook: "Not pump." Then she touched the side of the reservoir cap with 2 fingers and wiped the fluid on a white rag from her pocket. The oil was foamy, not glittering. That mattered. If the pump was destroying itself, metal dust would have been flashing in the oil like tiny silver fish. But this was pale foam, full of air. Air had to be getting in somewhere. Mara looked again under the platform. She saw a return hose that had been replaced recently. Clean black rubber, new clamps. Too obvious. Then she followed the suction line back with her eyes until it disappeared behind the step plate. There, almost hidden under mud and road dust, was an old hose with a shallow crack along the bend. Not split open, not leaking enough to drip, just enough to breathe. Her grandmother would have called it a whisper leak. Mara's grandmother, Ruth Keene, had run a 2-bay diesel repair shop outside Pryor for 31 years. Not the kind of mechanic who slapped fenders and guessed. She listened. She touched metal. She smelled burnt oil before she ever took a wrench to anything. When Mara was 7, Ruth taught her the difference between a dead pump and a pump starving for oil. A bad pump complains from inside itself, Ruth had said. A starving pump begs from the line. Ruth died the previous winter after a stroke. She left Mara 2 things: a roll-away toolbox nobody in the family wanted to move, and a stack of notebooks full of diagrams, part numbers, symptoms, and blunt little sentences written in blue pen. Noise changes under load. Foam means air. Check the cheap failure before you believe in the expensive one. Mara had been reading those notebooks for months. She had come to the Weller sale because she saw the catalog photo online and noticed something most buyers never would. The loader arms were drooping, but the front axle was dry. The pump housing was not stained. The tractor sat level, and the listing said the engine ran. That was enough to make her curious. She came to inspect it twice before auction day. Once with her mother, once with her Uncle Luis, who owned a welding truck and agreed to haul it if she bought it, though he told her plainly that he thought she was out of her mind. Both times, Mara did not look at the tractor the way the adults did. They looked for a verdict. She looked for a contradiction. On auction morning, she found it. The machine sounded ruined because it was sucking air through a cracked suction hose. A hose that cost less than dinner for 4 people. At 10 o'clock, the auctioneer climbed onto a flatbed trailer with a microphone clipped to his collar. His name was Vernon Pike, and he had the bright, fast voice of a man who could sell a bent gate as nearly straight if you squint. The small items went first: chains, toolboxes, old tires, a pressure washer that made the crowd laugh when it coughed once and died. By noon, the serious buyers had gathered around the equipment line. The disc harrow sold for more than expected. The rake went cheap. The battered grain truck started a brief argument between 2 brothers who both wanted the engine and neither wanted the rest of it. Mara waited near lot 29. She did not eat the sandwich her mother brought her. She did not ask to leave. She did not check her phone because she did not have one. She just stood there with a notebook pressed flat under her arm. At 12:37, Vernon Pike slapped the hood of the International. "Here we go, folks. Lot 29, 1978 International 986. Loader attached. Runs. Moves. Hydraulics weak. Sells as is. No guarantees." The operator climbed up and started the engine. The old tractor coughed, caught, and settled into a hard diesel rattle. Then he lifted the loader. It was 12 inches. The pump screamed. The arms jerked. The crowd chuckled before the loader even sank back down. Vernon smiled like he knew the joke, but still had to do his job. "Somebody give me 5,000 to start." Nobody moved. 4,000? Silence. 3? A man near the back said, "Try scrap." That got a bigger laugh. Vernon shook his head. "All right, who'll give me 1,500? A scrap buyer named Dale Mercer raised his number without even looking up from his coffee. 1,500. Now 1,750? Another man lifted a finger. 1,750. Dale went 2,000. The other man quit. Vernon turned his chant toward the crowd, but he already knew where the tractor was going. Dale had bought half-dead machines for 20 years. He knew how to strip parts, sell weights, and drag the rest across the scale. 2,000 was safe. 2,200 was probably still safe, but anything over that would cut into the margin. 2,000 once, Vernon said. 2,000 twice. 2,300. The voice came from the front row. Small, clear, steady. Vernon paused. So did the yard. He leaned over the rail of the flatbed and looked down at Mara. "Well," he said, grinning, "young lady, is that your daddy's bid?" Mara lifted number 62 higher. "No, sir, it is mine." Someone behind her said, "Bless her heart." Someone else said, "That tractor's about to teach math." Mara did not turn around. Dale Mercer looked at her then. Really looked. He saw the coat, the braid, the notebook, and the bidder card held in a hand that was not shaking. He raised his number. 2,500. Vernon's eyebrows lifted. 25. Do I hear 27? Mara said, 27. The crowd made that low sound people make when a joke starts turning into something else. Dale took a sip of coffee. 29. Mara did not answer immediately. She looked at the tractor, not at Dale, not at the crowd. She looked at the loader arms hanging crooked in the damp air, and one more time to the pump starving through that tiny crack. She thought about her grandmother's blue pen note. Check the cheap failure before you believe in the expensive one. Then she said, 31. Her mother closed her eyes. Uncle Luis, standing 20 feet away with his hands in his jacket pockets, whispered something in Spanish that did not sound like encouragement. Dale stared at the tractor. He could still make money at 32, maybe, but the little girl had already pushed him past easy profit. And the one thing scrap buyers hate more than bad machinery is guessing wrong in public. He lowered his number. Vernon waited. 3,100 going once. No one moved. Going twice. Mara kept her eyes on the tractor. Sold, Vernon said, to bidder 62. For 3 seconds the auction yard was almost quiet. Then the normal noise returned. Men clearing throats, chains dragging, engines starting. Somebody pretending they had not been watching. Mara walked to the office to sign the papers. The laughter did not follow her this time. A gray-haired man near the gate stepped out of her way and nodded once, as if he had not meant to, but his body had decided for him. That afternoon, Uncle Luis hauled the International to the back of his shop on a lowboy trailer. Mara rode behind him with her mother, saying nothing the whole drive. The tractor looked even worse away from the auction. The paint was dull. One headlight was missing. The seat foam had split open. Mud fell from the step plates in heavy flakes. Luis climbed down, looked at Mara, and said, "All right, Professor, show me." Mara did not smile. She opened her grandmother's notebook on the hood and turned to a page where Ruth had drawn a hydraulic circuit in careful blue ink. They drained a little fluid into a jar. Foam. Still no metal. They pulled the step plate. There it was. The suction hose had cracked on the underside where no one standing above it would see. Not a dramatic wound, not enough to impress a crowd, just a narrow, ugly line in old rubber. A failure small enough for grown men to ignore. Louise stared at it for a long time. Then he laughed once, softly, but it was not the same laugh from the auction yard. It was the sound of a man realizing he had almost missed something a child did not. The new hose cost $37. The clamps cost $9. The hydraulic fluid cost more than both. It took 2 hours to replace the hose, clean the screen, top the reservoir, and bleed the line. When Mara climbed into the seat, her boots barely reached the clutch. Louise stood beside the loader with one hand raised. "Easy," he said. Mara pulled the lever. The pump whined for half a second. Then the sound changed. It settled, deep, smooth, loaded. The loader arms rose, 1 foot, 3 feet, all the way. They held. No shudder, no sinking, no scream. Mara sat there with both hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead because if she looked at her mother, she might cry. Louise walked around the tractor, kicked the dirt once, and said, "Well, I'll be damned." But the story was not finished. A fixed loader did not mean a good tractor. A cracked hose could hide a tired pump. A tired pump could last 10 minutes, just long enough to fool a girl who wanted to be right. So Mara tested it the way her grandmother's notes said to test it. Warm it up. Lift under load. Hold pressure. Turn full lock. Listen after the fluid thins. For 3 days after school, Mara came to Louise's shop. She checked fittings. She cleaned the screen again. She changed the filter, the level on the reservoir with a piece of tape, and watched it like a nurse watching a fever chart. The tractor did not fail. On the 4th evening, Louise chained a round bale to the loader and told her to raise it. The International groaned, settled into its work, and lifted the bale clean off the ground. Mara looked down at the old red hood. For the first time since Ruth died, she felt the strange ache of grief loosen into something else. Not happiness exactly. Continuation. 6 weeks later, a hay farmer named Calvin Roach came to look at the tractor. He needed a loader tractor before winter feeding got hard. He had heard from Louise that the old International was not dead after all. Calvin did not talk down to Mara. He asked her what had been wrong with it, and she told him. He asked what she had replaced. She handed him a sheet of notebook paper with the parts, the fluid, the dates, and the test results written in columns. Calvin read the page. Then he looked at her mother and said, "She write all this?" Mara answered before her mother could. "Yes, sir." Calvin nodded. He started the tractor, lifted the loader, held it, turned the wheel, drove it around the yard twice. When he climbed down, he did not make an offer to Dana. He made it to Mara. "I'll give you 10.8." Mara swallowed. She had paid $3,100. After hose, clamps, fluid, filter, hauling, and auction fees, she was in it for just under $3,500. She said, 11.2. Calvin looked at her for 3 seconds. Then he smiled. 11. Mara shook his hand. She cleared a little over $7,500 on a tractor the whole auction yard had laughed at for being broken. By spring, the story had moved farther than Mara wanted it to. Men who had watched her bid started calling Louise's shop, not to talk to him, to ask if the girl with the notebook would come listen to a baler, a skid steer, an old case backhoe that would not start when warm. Mara went when her mother allowed it. She charged $40 in gas money. Sometimes she was right, sometimes she was not. When she was not sure, she said she was not sure. That may have been the thing that made the old men trust her most. She never performed confidence for them. She performed attention. 3 years later, Mara still keeps Ruth's notebooks in the bottom drawer of the rollaway toolbox. She has added 2 of her own: date, machine, symptom, test, conclusion. She does not tell the auction story unless somebody asks, and even then, she tells it without making herself the hero. She says the tractor told her what was wrong. She just listened longer than everybody else. But Luis tells it differently. He says he remembers the exact moment the yard went quiet. Not when she won the bid, not when the loader finally lifted, before all of that. He remembers the moment she closed her eyes beside the tractor while grown men laughed behind her. Because everyone else had looked at a weak loader and seen a dead pump. Mara heard air. Because everyone else had looked at a weak loader and seen a dead pump. Mara heard air. And sometimes that is the whole difference between being dismissed and being right. Not age, not volume, not the loudest opinion leaning on the rail. Just one person willing to notice the small thing everybody else was too sure to check.